This is the way it feels to move through summer in Lululemon. Iconic Align softness without the front seam. For our smoothest look and feel ever, summer won't know what hit it. Stretch your limits in the non-stop flexibility of the new Lululemon Align No-Line Pant in select stores and at Lululemon.com.
Did you know you lose 91 days a year to scrolling? That's your entire summer gone. So this summer, log off and show up with friends and some ice-cold Heinekens. Then instead of commenting on your cruise stories, he'll be making memories with them. Sorry, social media. The scrolling ends and the fun begins with cold Heinekens and good friends. Heineken, social networking since 1873. Available at your local Heineken retailer or for delivery at Heineken.com. Must be 21 plus to purchase. Enjoy Heineken responsibly.
I still remember the first time I felt noticed by a famous parasocial crush. I was in graduate school studying sleep and memory, and my research project involved hours and hours of sitting in a dark room waiting for undergraduate participants to fall asleep so that I could actually start my research. I passed the time listening to tons of podcasts. Through absorbing those hours upon hours of audio, I developed quite the parasocial relationship with the voices of Radiolab. Sure, the beautiful sound design, the heartfelt stories about how our lives intersect with science, that all spoke to me. But I ended up transferring many of those feelings to the actual reporters and hosts behind the voices of the show. Imagine my surprise when in my peak Radiolab consumption, I saw the notification on Twitter that Latif Nasser had followed me. Nasser started as a producer of the show and today co-hosts. I was on cloud 9. Now that we followed each other, surely that meant we might meet up at a scientific conference. And then maybe we'd become friends. And then maybe I could pitch stories for the show and even get on Radiolab myself. This was a recurring daydream that I indulged in during the long hours of data analysis. It literally inspired me to take journalism classes, along with my regular courses, and I even started pitching and writing freelance science journalism stories. Overall, I'd say that parasocial crush on Radiolab generally, and Latif in this case specifically, set me up on a new path in becoming a science communicator. Thanks to my meager grad school stipend, it didn't inspire me to spend a bunch of money to continually reinforce that parasocial bond. No, that would come later with Supernatural. But at the end of the day, I didn't become best friends with Latif Nasser. Nor has Radiolab invited me to join their staff. Because that relationship was never actually real. Parasocial relationships never are. And we have to admit that to ourselves. Look, I'm not here to rain on any parades, although maybe I'll gently pop some bubbles. Because I get that fandom is an escape for many of us, a way to imagine a different world without our medical bills and daily drudgeries weighing us down. But sometimes that escapism leaps from innocent enjoyment to a parasocial relationship with someone who doesn't actually know us. And that relationship can blind us to the reality of our situation, or become all too consuming, or both. Of course, I think it's much too simplistic to claim that all parasocial bonds are just bad, full stop. So, in this final installment of the season, I want to look at what we get out of parasocial relationships. Where have we found inspiration or joy, like Radiolab for me? And where can the one-sided bond do more harm than good? Let's begin with the good, shall we? In a somewhat surprising turn of events, while researching this season, I found a Time article titled "In Defense of Parasocial Relationships." I'd love to claim that they stole the nomenclature from me, but it was published in July of 2023, 2 full years before this season was announced. Besides, I actually stole my name from the book In Defense of Marxism, so... Anyways, the Time article has fun interviews with researchers and fans talking about how their parasocial relationships have had a positive impact on their lives. It also pointed out that more of us might have these relationships than we're willing to admit.
By some estimates, 51% of Americans have been in parasocial relationships, though only 16% will admit to it.
The author, Angela Haupt, goes on to explain that researchers have found that parasocial relationships can help adolescents develop autonomy and form their identity by giving them a safe place to experiment with identity markers that's more protected from their peers. We discussed how this kind of thing was extra impactful during COVID in a previous episode.
Parasocial relationships can expand social networks and offer a sense of companionship in plenty of other ways. That became especially true during the COVID-19 pandemic, when many people, isolated at home and unable to spend time with friends and family, gravitated towards online communities, including fandoms.
But I think the best breakdown I've seen of the benefits of parasocial relationships was from an interview with clinical psychologist Adam Borland for the Cleveland Clinic. Here's a selection of the article. Aside from being entertaining, parasocial relationships can also have a positive impact on your mental health. Here are a few reasons why. First, they allow for positive modeling. According to Dr. Borland, parasocial relationships allow us to observe people we admire doing admirable things. It's not unusual for a person you have a parasocial relationship with to serve as a role model. For example, your favorite athlete might inspire you to put in more time at the gym. Secondly, they ease loneliness. Dr. Borland notes that a parasocial relationship can be a potential source of connection, comfort, and companionship, especially if you feel lonely, isolated, or deal with social anxiety. Parasocial relationships were especially helpful during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, when many people were in lockdown by themselves. Parasocial relationships offered an opportunity to feel that sense of connection and camaraderie in difficult times, Dr. Borland confirms. Third, we can learn from them. You know Taylor Swift's chai sugar cookie recipe by heart. You're taking Korean classes so you won't need captions at your next big K-pop concert. You love your favorite book so much you've started writing fan fiction, imagining the character's next big adventure. Parasocial relationships can inspire us to be creative, encourage us to take creative risks, and teach us new things about the world we live in. Fourth, they can be validating. It can be hard being different, especially if there aren't a lot of people around you who understand or support you. Maybe learning that Christina Applegate is living with multiple sclerosis helped you come to terms with your own diagnosis. Maybe you really needed to hear RuPaul tell you to love yourself this week after being picked on in school. Maybe reading about Drew Barrymore getting sober is what got you into treatment. A relationship doesn't have to be two-sided to make us feel seen, supported, or worthy of respect. And finally, they can serve as wish fulfillment. Most of us are never going to have the opportunity to star in a blockbuster film, donate millions of dollars to charity, or become the New York Times bestseller. But being in a parasocial relationship with somebody who does get to do those things can make us feel like we're along for the ride. It also seems like, from the celebrity's vantage, parasocial relationships can be positive too. My guests have generally had positive things to say about their experiences with fame and parasocial relationships. Here's a few comments from Jennifer May Nickel, Ali Matu, and Dean Sinclair from the band August Hotel.
We're all human. It's okay to be excited while still reining it in.
Yeah.
For me, parasocial relationships have always been about connection, understanding, fun, relief, ways of feeling less alone. It's weird relationship stuff we're heading into, or not heading into, we're like diving deep into. I think it's this amazing human thing that we can connect with people who we are not related to, collaborate, work together, share stories, beliefs, and ideas that we've never seen happen, but we believe in. This is the stuff that's allowed us to have these, take over this entire planet and now like venture out into other ones for both good and bad.
The positive things I've seen, not necessarily maybe through my own groups, but who say maybe I've opened for. I did a show in Los Angeles once, and all these fans who knew the artist I was with from around the country, it was like her EP release show, and they all made plans to all get a hotel, and some of them were meeting for the first time from, every coast, right? And it's like they had this shared their thing in common. They met through their liking of this artist, and it was like a really cool thing to see friendships exit and I'm not devaluing, just if a friendship still exists online, that's one thing, but to actually be something where you can be physical and like in, interacting, like go to the show in person with people that you've become friends with. It's really cool to see. Also, like one of the tours I did this fall, there was some fans from Europe who came over together, and I started to get very concerned because I was like, how are you guys going to get from Indianapolis to Ann Arbor? And they're like, oh, we don't know yet. It's like, you guys are terrifying me so much right now, to the point where they would start like messaging me, like letting me know like when they got like a ride or like what was going on. Is I started feeling very responsible for them. but it was just cool to see.
So even those who experience the non-fandom side of parasocial relationships have seen how it provides benefits. That's not to say they haven't also seen some of the less positive aspects. As David Giles and John Maltby stated in their 2006 paper, Praying at the Altar of the Stars,
now imagine, if you have to, that you're a diehard fan of a famous individual. How much of your life is spent thinking about that person? How much money have you spent on them? Concert, ticket books, travel, souvenirs, other merchandising. How important is it to your identity that you're a fan of that person? How would you feel that person did something bad and it became embarrassing to be associated with them?
There's no doubt we live in a modern, capitalism-fueled hellscape. And because of that, parasocial bonds can just be another way to extract not just money, but also time and energy from fans. After all, the best boosters for celebrities are their fans, producing millions of dollars worth of advertising for absolutely free. As Carrying Wayward podcaster Marie puts it,
and so the second that you have that bond, that connection, that understanding with somebody, then you can, sell them stuff and market stuff to them. And on the, that's kind of like my cynical side speaking.
It turns out that while the idea of a parasocial relationship feels akin to academic fields like psychology and anthropology, the majority of the current literature is published in journals serving fields like PR, marketing, and business, with the goal of building and leveraging parasocial relationships to build your brand and make money. It's just more crappy capitalism where you commodify a person as the product to sell. It reminds me of the refrain, "There's no ethical consumption under capitalism." The phrase is meant to shed light on how capitalism requires exploitation at some level. You don't make money for selling something for what it's worth, but by overcharging and not paying workers appropriately for their labor. So if you're the artist, then you're the product and the labor. And you end up having to put in all this extra effort and work to build your following if you want to see some payout down the line. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's why musicians or podcasters or actors go into their respective fields. But it's not just the ways that parasocial relationships intersect with capitalism that can be a problem. As musician and vintage guitar retailer Chris Scott told me in our interview,
Mark David Chapman felt like John Lennon had personally betrayed him, and personally John Lennon had betrayed his own ideals. Like, he absolutely, I mean, the last autograph John Lennon ever signed was for the man who killed him. So he was a fan who, was also deranged and murderous and all those things. But yeah, when he was in, if I remember correctly, when he was in Hawaii, like, he was, delusional that he had a relationship with John Lennon. And, so yeah, that's the extreme end of a parasocial relationship, but it absolutely was a parasocial relationship.
In extreme cases, parasocial relationships can be dangerous to the celebrity. But they don't have to be that extreme to be net negative. Sometimes they're just upsetting, like when it feels like everyone suddenly turns on you, a la J-Law, according to podcaster Alex Goldman.
If you've been around long enough, people start hating you just because you eventually do something that they don't like, or many things they don't like. So if you've been doing something in the public eye long enough, there's always like a terrible backlash. And if you look at every celebrity, like, I don't know, Jennifer Lawrence, like, she was like a darling for such a long time. And then for not really any reason, I feel like people just started hating her. And there was like a lot of like, I can't imagine being in her position and having people just say awful things about you all the time for no real reason.
I'm not saying every fan ends up stalking their parasocial crush or creating an online hate mob, but we have seen these patterns before, and I think it would be dishonest to completely ignore them. It also makes me wonder what the future of parasocial relationships will look like in such a rapidly changing media environment. We spend more and more time isolated at work and at home, and one of our last bastions of relaxation is media, like movies and music. But then it feels like we're trying to create community out of that one-directional consumptive pattern and misbuilding the real community that we all need. As psychologist and YouTuber Dr. Ali Matu puts it.
And I think that's like a huge problem. When you have like climate disasters, when you have environment, any kind of disaster that you have, it's not your Reddit community that's going to be helpful. It's going to be your neighbors, your community. And that ability to like connect regardless of political or other beliefs, but because, look, we all live here. This is our community. We need to take care of it. We need to come together. We need to help each other. That stuff is really important. And I think as some of those like looser connections are disappearing, we have a need for that kind of stuff. We still have a need for these kinds of people, these different types of people. And the online connections we have, like Star Wars fandom, this fandom, whatever you're into, the influencers you're into, they don't give you much back. So there's a desire for something that I think is really there. And that is a bigger problem. I don't know how we would fix it.
As you can probably tell from my personal disclosures in this podcast season, I'm not immune to parasocial relationships. And I'm not even trying particularly hard to pull myself away from them. Feeling a kinship with a performer or podcaster isn't harming my daily life. As for my wallet, maybe when it comes to supernatural fandom, but we all have our vices. I think the key is recognizing that parasocial relationships are okay as long as they aren't replacing other relationships in your life. It's okay to feel parasocially bonded with Taylor Swift, as long as you don't think she's going to solve your loneliness. And as long as you realize that, to some degree, this relationship you feel is a financial transaction. We can have fun with celebrities, fandoms, and other online networks, but we need other connections as well. People that'll check in on us when we're low. People who come together to protect each other in times of rising fascism. Parasocial figures can act as catalysts or figureheads, but we need true community to address bigger problems. And I think that as long as we're all building those communities in our actual neighborhoods with actual other people, I don't see the harm in a bit of parasocial fun. With this final episode, I want to look a bit towards the future and a couple of trends I see on the horizon for parasociality. First, and most obviously, I don't think parasocial relationships are going away. Ever. After all, it's just a hijacking of our brain's desire for connection. Perhaps ancient people felt a parasocial bond to Gilgamesh. Or maybe some worshippers of Artemis felt like they really got the Greek deity and could be friends. Who knows? But for the modern context, I suspect parasocial bonds will only increase in both intensity and frequency. Thanks to the ubiquity of social media, celebrities are more and more expected to market and sell some idealized and accessible version of themselves. All this manufacturing of brand and style to build a following is really just marketing speak for make people fall in parasocial love with you. And if you have a creative career, you might not even have a choice in doing this. I've heard horror stories of authors not getting their books picked up because they didn't have enough social media followers, and bands not getting gigs because their follower count was too low. Whether we like it or not, creating parasocial bonds through social media is the new way to get recognized and hopefully score that big contract or album deal. So, yeah, thanks to the platforms like TikTok and Instagram, I don't think we'll be seeing any diminishment of parasocial bonds anytime soon. And this leads into my second point. I think the way we interact online and find internet main characters of the day are basically generating mini celebrities that thrive on those parasocial relationships. But this fame can be extremely short-lived. Everyone's looking for their 15 minutes of fame, but that clock is counting down until you become irrelevant and the next main character enters the public mind. For this reason, I love Jamie Loftus's podcast, 16th Minute of Fame, which looks at both the factors that precipitated an internet character's rise to fame and what happened to them afterwards. But my point is that I think these trends are moving faster and faster, which leads people to lean more heavily on building parasocial ties in order to try and create a relationship that keeps them relevant that little bit longer. And, well, I don't think that's exactly a good thing. The last future prediction I want to make has to do with AI, although I am loath to use that term. Large language models, or LLMs, aren't actually intelligent. They're just word or phrase prediction generators with huge corpuses of training data stolen from the internet and tweaked to be always agreeable to any human that types a query. Okay, but how do I see AI connecting with parasocial relationships? Well, besides the obvious horrifying uses of AI image generators to create non-consensual nudes of famous people, or using an LLM to play act at being a fictional character and have conversations, We're already seeing news stories of people falling into parasocial relationships with their AI chatbot. Why do I call them parasocial? Well, because a chatbot is just an algorithm that spits out generic responses while slowly tailoring those responses to meet your expectations and desires. There's no man behind the curtain, no God in the machine. It's just really good predictive text. But because of how our brains are wired to build relationships, people are becoming attached to these bots, going so far as to trust them as friends or even therapists. According to a 404 media investigation, these therapy bots are lying about their credentials, potentially endangering very real humans with terrible therapeutic advice. This trend scares me. Our social brains are getting hijacked by technology that is basically a more clever Clippy, and I worry how this detracts from us building real human connections. After all, why get a boyfriend or a girlfriend when your pocket AI only tells you how beautiful and clever you are and never challenges your preconceived notions? Never makes you want to learn to accommodate and partake in the back and forth nature of true conversation and connection, where sometimes you are wrong. Nope, your friendly AI chatbot just blindly agrees and makes you feel good. It's like junk food. Sure, it feels good to eat, but you're not getting any real nutrition that you need, and that's ultimately going to be bad for your health. AI is so bad for society in a myriad of ways. Stealing artists' work, wasting precious water, burning through forests to generate enough energy, reinforcing economic disparities. But I think it's also bad for us as individuals, too. My final thoughts on parasocial relationships basically come down to a suggestion of moderation. There's nothing wrong with having a parasocial crush. Human brains are wired to find connection, after all, and more of us than we admit indulge in these unidirectional relationships. This isn't by default a bad thing. But we need to make sure that we aren't finding our only community in parasocial bonds. We need real community as well. Flesh and blood, friends and neighbors who can support us. The loneliness epidemic is very real, and we should recognize that fan activities based around parasocial bonds are one way that we can alleviate that a little. But it can't be the only community we build. Ultimately, we all have to know ourselves and monitor our behaviors and be cognizant of our choices. Don't go into debt for a celebrity just to attend all their concerts or meet them at every convention. Don't rely on parasocial bonds to get you through hard times. Build real, reciprocal community. Touch grass, as the youth say. Are the youth even still saying that? But also, don't feel guilty for indulging in parasocial daydreams. After all, it seems most of us do so, and there is evidence that some degree of this behavior has positive results. Just keep it all in perspective. Now, if I can just remind myself of this every time Creation puts up a new auction for meet and greets. So, that's a wrap on season 3. But don't worry, I have some new projects already in the hopper that I think you'll enjoy. In the meantime, here's one last reminder to my call out for listeners. What questions have I not answered for you? What topics around parasociality would you like me to explore more deeply? Send me a note or a voice memo with your thoughts, and I might incorporate it in the post-season special episode. You can either send it via Instagram DM, Blue Sky message, or via my email that I'll link in the show notes. I'm even extending the deadline to July 20th. That's 2025 for those of you listening in the future. Now for the show's credits. Editorial support was provided by Dr. Anna Funk. Music was composed and performed by Chris Scott, with some selections by August Hotel. Cover art was designed by Liz Hand. In Defense of Fandom is part of the Geekscape Podcast Network. If you like the show, giving us a review on Apple Podcasts is a great way to help support this work and help even more listeners discover us. Your support is deeply appreciated. One final note. Sorry for my chain smoker voice. Turns out summer colds are still very real. But thanks for listening. Bye.
My name is Daniel Reguera, and I am host of This American Phone.
All right. You're cut off.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.